Hello and welcome everyone. This right here is my current favourite tank and I'm really excited as it's almost time to add in some cool new fish. I set up this tank about 45 days ago, so that's a month and a half or 6 and a bit weeks, and things are coming along really nicely. The current inhabitants have settled in beautifully and the fish are doing great. They seem to be really comfortable and confident too. The shrimp are doing even better. The bright beautiful cherries look immaculate against all that green, and I've already seen 2 different buried shrimp, so it won't be long before there's shrimplets everywhere. And then the snails, well, they beat the shrimp to the punch, and I've already seen lots of little snail babies absolutely everywhere. They're just so cute. In terms of the actual scape and the plants, well, there's a little bit of work in order. Some of the plants are absolutely thriving. The crips haven't melted back whatsoever, and they're already sending out new leaves. Some of the stems are doing great too, like this one up in the corner, it's already reaching the surface. However, some of the other plants aren't doing quite so hot. There was an anubias right here which just bizarrely shedded all its leaves and died, which is really strange because all the other anubiases seem to be doing really well. And then the ends of the hygrophila over here, for some reason it's turned white and have grown nowhere near as much as the one in this corner here, so I think that's probably due to a nutrient deficiency. The floating plants have multiplied loads and I've taken lots of them out and spread them across all of my aquariums. However, to my absolute dismay, annoying algae has crashed the party. Some of the rocks have turned a green colour from the algae, which I personally like as I think it looks really natural. However, some of the other rocks have started to grow a hair algae, which is really frustrating, and it's also got its clasps on some of the wood as well, so I really need to nip that in the bud and see to it to stop it spreading and getting worse. There's also some staghorn algae on some parts of the wood, but mainly on the roots of the floating plants, as well as other types of algae that started to grow on the glass on the front and the sides, but we can scrape that off no problem. There is some unsightly mulm in the foreground, as well as some big build-ups in the back as well, so I really need to take care of that. So there's quite a lot that needs to be done, as I want this tank looking its absolute best, nice and pristine for when we add in those new fish. So it's time for me to crack on and get my hands wet. To tackle the possible nutrient deficiency turning those leaves white, I'm going to add in some spare root tabs I had laying around. I broke them up and evenly distributed them between the roots of the stems. I did consider trimming off the white leaves to see if healthy ones regrow, however I'm going to give these stems a few weeks to see if they improve before giving them the chop. I also trimmed that super long stem in half and replanted the really healthy looking cutting. The few gangly bits of staghorn were easily removed from the roots of the water lettuce. However, the long hairy roots had collected quite a lot of debris. This was easily knocked off and sucked out by the filter and a water change. In doing so, I discovered that more of the Nubius was on the brink of death. The one in the centre was dislodged and it dropped over half of its leaves, but it gets even worse. This large Anubias pateri golden corn was in an unsalvageable state. All its leaves were clinging on by a mere thread, and its once healthy chunky rhizome had melted down to a discoloured mush. I was absolutely devastated. Oh, that is not good, that's dying. That's like completely dying, what the f... Look at that, that's f... Literally all the leaves have just fallen apart, like what the f... I was very unhappy to say the least, and quite confused at what would have caused the Anubias' demise. This left me feeling pretty frustrated and unmotivated. However, at this time, I was reminded by the good old British saying, "Bruh." And so I did. I channeled every bit of my frustration and began frantically scrubbing the wooden rocks with a pipe cleaner. Inevitably, I wouldn't be able to get all of it, but it would definitely be an improvement. I kept up that momentum and took on the glass. This really mucked up the water, so I switched the filter into top gear and gave the foreground a blast with a pipette to reduce the amount of visible mulm. We're now approaching the final stretch, so I drained some of the water before cleaning the filters. Chocolate milk. A few hours later and we're looking great. However, there are a few Anubias-shaped holes in the scape now, and the heater is slightly visible. Luckily, I have a few spare plants that are perfect for the job. The bulbitis fitted in perfectly, so fingers crossed it doesn't meet the same demise as the Anubias. At this point, I realised that I hadn't incorporated any moss into the scape, so I stole a few chunks and crammed them in between the base of the hardscape. I'm sure the shrimps will really appreciate it. And after a few final touches, we're just about done for the day. I hope the new fish make the most of their final night in the quarantine tank. Okay everyone, so it's the next day and it's almost time for us to add in those fish. As an extra precaution, I don't want any tragedies, so I'm going to be dropping the water level down just a little bit in the first few days while the new fish settle in, and that should minimise and mitigate any risk of them accidentally going overboard. First in goes 6 ember tetras. Their name may not seem quite fitting right now, as they're pretty stressed out and quite pale, but just wait until these lot colour up and settle in. The chili rasboras were intrigued and gave them a friendly and warm welcome. The next lot, they require no introduction. They're frequent stars on this channel, so I really hope you're not getting bored of them. But I absolutely love my little pandas to death, and I put my blood, sweat and tears into breeding them. I'm sure they'll really appreciate the larger tank, and I hope they get on well with the pygmies. It would be so cute to see them swim in school together. Last and certainly not least, in goes 5 sparkling gouramis. It was quite difficult to choose between the many species and colour morphs of gourami, however, the striking iridescent appearance and smaller size won me over. They're also known as the pygmy gourami, due to being the smallest in the family. However, despite their small size, these fish are capable of making a fascinating and loud croaking sound, similar to a frog. And if that wasn't interesting enough, they also create small nests made of bubbles for their eggs. So hopefully in the future we can get them breeding and watch their marvellous mating ritual. 1 week later and I'm incredibly happy with my choice of new fish. It's really helped cement this aquarium as one of my all-time favourites. All the fish live harmoniously together and they have their own distinct roles and behaviours, which I think complement each other very nicely. I only have one real issue, and that's with the gouramis. In the first few days, I caught them chasing the shrimp and it looked like they were trying to have a nibble. This came as quite a shock as they had spent over 2 weeks in the quarantine tub with a ton of shrimp, many of which were much smaller, and not once had I ever seen them show interest. It's even stranger that the shrimp I witnessed them chase initially were absolutely massive and practically the same size as the gouramis. This led me to the conclusion that the reason for the sudden change in behaviour must be down to the colour of the shrimp. The ones in here are bright red, whereas the ones in the quarantine were the wild rejects, so mainly clear, brown and black. Therefore I have two possible theories. The red colour reminds them of a food they once had, like a flake or a bloodworm, or potentially that these fish just get riled up when they see the colour red, a bit like a bull with a matador. The gouramis seem to have realised that the shrimp aren't food anymore, or at least the adults aren't, but it's left the shrimp feeling rather scared and quite cautious, so they spend most of their time hiding in the back and in and around the filters, which is a real shame, as before they were everywhere and loads were visible at any given moment. I considered removing the buried shrimp to give the shrimplets a better chance at survival. However, I haven't seen them in recent days, so hopefully they've hunkered down somewhere safe between the wood and rocks. And fingers crossed those babies stay out of sight and maybe they'll stand a chance. Despite the sparkling gouramis' hunting instinct and hunger for shrimp, they are my favourite inhabitant in this tank. They're incredibly interesting and very inquisitive. They appear to move with a sense of intention and really seem to analyse their surroundings and think and plan before carrying out actions. They're quite social too, but in a different way to the other fish. Maybe I'm overthinking and personifying them a bit too much, but I really enjoy their personality and character. The pandas are so fun and active, and they are a constant presence at the bottom, nuzzling around the sand like little piggies. The ember tetras with their bright orange colours are so eye-catching, and they look beautiful contrasted with the red and pink of the chili rasbora. Their constant meandering in the middle and by the surface makes the tank feel busy and full but not overcrowded. The three new additions, along with the chili rasbora, pygmy cories, scarlet baddis, shrimp and snails, all combine to make an almost perfect community aquarium that I'm extremely happy with. Hey little dudes. I personally find it quite easy to become overly focused on tiny little gripes and small imperfections, like algae, mulm, or plants not doing so well. These ecosystems that we create are so complex and diverse, it's almost impossible to control every minor detail and variable. And sometimes, no matter how hard you try, nature will just go ahead and do its own thing anyway. So don't forget to zoom out, take everything in as a whole, and appreciate these marvellous and amazing creations and fascinating little slices of nature that we can create in these tiny little glass boxes. Well, thank you for making it this far. I'd love to hear your thoughts and opinions in the comments, and if you enjoyed the video, give us a like. But I really hope you all have a wonderful day, and hopefully I'll see you later, fish friends.